The M1 carbine is a lightweight, easy-to-use, semi-automatic carbine that was a standard firearm for the U.S. military during World War II, the Korean War and well into the Vietnam War. The M1 carbine was produced in several variants and was widely used by not only the U.S. military, but by military, paramilitary and police forces around the world. It has also been a popular civilian firearm. The M2 carbine is the selective fire version of the M1 carbine capable of firing in both semi-automatic and full automatic. Despite having a similar name and appearance, the M1 carbine is not a carbine version of the M1 Garand rifle. They are different firearms, and they use different ammunition. Prior to World War II, U.S. Army Ordnance received reports that the full-size M1 rifle was too heavy and cumbersome for most support troops to carry. This request called for a compact, lightweight defensive weapon with greater range, accuracy and firepower than handguns, while weighing half as much as the Thompson submachine gun or the M1 rifle. The U.S. Army decided that a carbine would adequately fulfill all of these requirements, but specified that the new arm should weigh no more than 5 pounds and have an effective range of 300 yards. Paratroopers were also added to the list of intended users and a folding stock version would also be developed. A total of over 6.1 million M1 carbines of various models were manufactured, making it the most produced small arm for the American military during World War II. The M1 carbine was also one of the most cost-effective weapons used by the United States military during World War II. At the beginning of World War II, the average production cost for an M1 carbine was approximately $45, about half the cost of an M1 rifle at approximately $85 and about a fifth of the cost of a Thompson submachine gun at approximately $225. The .30 carbine ammunition was also far cheaper to produce than the standard .30-06 ammunition, used fewer resources, was smaller, lighter, faster and easier to make. These were major factors in the United States military decision to adopt the M1 carbine, especially when considering the vast numbers of weapons and ammunition manufactured and transported by the United States during World War II. During World War II, the M1 carbine gained generally high praise for its small size, lightweight and firepower, especially by those troops who were unable to use a full-size rifle as their primary weapon. However, its reputation in frontline combat was mixed and negative reports began to surface with airborne operations in Sicily in 1943, and increased during the fall and winter of 1944. In the Pacific Theater, soldiers and guerrilla forces operating in heavy jungle with only occasional enemy contact praised the carbine for its small size, lightweight, and firepower. However, soldiers and Marines engaged in frequent daily firefights found the weapon to have insufficient penetration and stopping power. While carbine bullets would easily penetrate the front and back of steel helmets, as well as the body armor used by Japanese forces of the era, reports of the carbine's failure to stop enemy soldiers, sometimes after multiple hits, appeared in individual after-action reports, post-war evaluations, and service histories of both the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps. On October 26, 1944, in response to the Germans' widespread use of automatic weapons, especially the Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle, the Select Fire M2 carbine was introduced, along with a new 30-round magazine. The M2 had a fully automatic rate of fire of about 850 to 900 rounds per minute. Although actual M2 production began late in the war, U.S. Ordnance issued conversion part kits to allow field conversion of semi-auto M1 carbines to the Selective Fire M2 configuration. These converted M1/M2 Select Fire carbines saw limited combat service in Europe, primarily during the final Allied advance into Germany. In the Pacific, both converted and original M2 carbines saw limited use in the last days of the fighting in the Philippines. By the Korean War, the Select Fire M2 carbine had largely replaced the submachine gun in U.S. service and was the most widely used carbine variant. Although, the semi-auto M1 carbine was also widely used especially by support troops. However, in Korea, all versions of the carbine soon acquired a widespread reputation for jamming in extreme cold weather, this being eventually traced to weak return springs, freezing of parts due to overly viscous lubricants and inadequate cartridge recoil impulse as the result of sub-zero temperatures. The M1 and M2 carbines were again issued to U.S. forces during the Vietnam War, particularly with United States Air Force Security Police and United States Army Special Forces. These weapons began to be replaced by the M16 in 1964, and they were generally out of service by 1970s, although they were used in limited numbers by U.S. troops and security personnel until the fall of Saigon in 1975. At least 793,994 M1 and M2 carbines were given to the South Vietnamese and were widely used throughout the Vietnam War. A number were captured during the war by Viet Cong, with some made compact by shortening the barrel and/or stock. During World War II, the British SAS used the M1 and M1A1 carbines after 1943. They were found to be suited to the kind of operation the 2 British, 2 French, and 1 Belgian regiment carried out. It was handy enough to parachute with, and, in addition, could be easily stowed in an operational jeep. Other specialist intelligence collection units, such as 30 assault units sponsored by the Naval Intelligence Division of the British Admiralty, which operated across the entire Allied area of operations, also made use of this weapon. The M1 and M2 carbines were widely used by military, police, and security forces and their opponents during the many guerrilla and civil wars throughout Latin America until the 1990s, when they were mostly replaced by more modern designs. A notable user was Che Guevara, who used them during the Cuban Revolution and in Bolivia, where he was executed by a Bolivian soldier armed with an M2 carbine.